Welcome, everyone. Today we're plunging into something truly fascinating. The incredible power of language itself.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, mere words. But when you arrange them deliberately, when you structure them with intent, they transform.
They really do.
They can turn a simple statement into a profound insight, a basic argument into a really nuanced debate, or just a casual observation into a compelling point.
It's like understanding the hidden gears, isn't it? The mechanics behind effective communication.
Exactly, like discovering the hidden architecture behind truly powerful communication. And this is especially important, I think, when you're aiming for precision and impact in those high-stakes situations.
Like what sort of situation?
Well, think about an IELTS essay, or maybe a TOEFL speaking test, or even just a crucial professional presentation. Getting the language right there is key.
It's absolutely true. And what's often overlooked, I find, is that while we all learn to speak and write, we rarely break down how we build sophisticated thoughts using specific linguistic tools.
Right. We just sort of do it.
We might use them instinctively, yeah, but understanding their mechanics, that unlocks a whole new level of control and precision.
Exactly. And that's really our mission for you today. We're going to unpack a comprehensive collection of advanced sentence structures and phrases.
And these aren't just dusty grammar rules.
No, definitely not obscure rules you memorized back in school. They're the actual building blocks that allow you to express complex ideas with real precision and genuine impact.
It's about elevation, really.
We're talking about moving way beyond basic sentences to truly sophisticated, compelling expression.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, mastering these structures can significantly elevate your ability to articulate complex thoughts, present balanced arguments, connect ideas seamlessly.
Which is invaluable.
Totally. It's about being not just well-informed, but, eloquently informed. Imagine the difference that makes in a debate or a critical written submission when you can effortlessly weave in these layers of meaning.
Absolutely. So for this exploration today, we're drawing from a really rich source, a fantastic collection of these structures that lays out their functions, provides clear examples, really good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Looks comprehensive.
Yeah. We'll be extracting the most important insights, the sort of nuggets of knowledge, complete with maybe some strategic applications you might not have considered before.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start?
All right, let's unpack this and start with what many consider the very foundation of complex thought. Complex clauses. You might know them as subordinate clauses.
Okay. Foundational is the right word. This category is key because it's where one idea is made dependent on another.
Dependent.
Meaning one clause can't stand alone as a full sentence. It relies on the main clause. And this dependency, this relationship, allows you to add layers of meaning, things like reason, contrast, condition.
Oh, I see.
Which are absolutely vital for building detailed analytical arguments. You need these to show complex relationships between ideas.
All right, let's jump right in then. How about we start with concession and contrast, using phrases like although, even though, while, and whereas.
Perfect starting point.
These feel so powerful because they let you acknowledge one truth while immediately presenting a counterpoint. It feels much more nuanced than just sticking a but in there, doesn't it?
It really does, but can sometimes feel a bit blunt, a bit simplistic. These structures signal a more considered approach right away.
Okay, let's take an example. Although technology has improved communication, it has also led to social isolation.
That's a classic example. What immediately jumps out with although is how it signals a two-sided perspective right from the start. You're acknowledging the positive improved communication, then you smoothly pivot to the negative, the social isolation.
So it shows you've thought about both sides.
Exactly. It shows you've considered both the upside and the downside, demonstrating a more, let's say, holistic understanding. And strategically, the advantage here is that you're kind of disarming potential objections before they even arise. By conceding a point up front, yes, technology has improved communication, you make your subsequent counterpoint about isolation seem fairer, more thoughtful, and harder to dismiss.
I love the disarming objections.
Yeah.
Okay, what about even though renewable energy is costly, its benefits are long-term?
Similar mechanism, but maybe with a slightly different emphasis. Here, you're explicitly accepting a negative, the cost, which is often the main criticism, right?
Yeah, the cost factor always comes up.
Right. But then you immediately emphasize a greater positive, the long-term benefits. It really signals a forward-thinking perspective, showing you're looking beyond immediate challenges to the bigger picture.
So it frames the argument effectively.
Precisely. By stating the drawback first, you address the criticism head-on, and then you pivot to the more compelling, future-oriented advantage. It's a very persuasive framing, especially in policy discussions or business proposals where you need to justify investment.
Okay, and while urbanization provides economic benefits, it also creates housing shortages. How does while work here?
While, in this context, functions very similarly to although. It simultaneously presents two contrasting aspects of urbanization, the economic upside and the housing downside. It conveys a comprehensive understanding of the issue's multifaceted nature. It shows you see the complexity.
It presents both sides concurrently.
Yes, exactly. And then there's whereas, which is fantastic for drawing a direct comparison and stark contrast between two distinct entities.
Like in the example, developed countries have abundant resources, whereas developing nations often struggle.
Right. It creates a very clear, almost side-by-side comparison. The structure itself emphasizes the disparity, the difference between the two groups. It highlights the contrast sharply.
So what's the big takeaway, the sort of nugget of knowledge for these concession and contrast clauses?
I think the real power is that they demonstrate a sophisticated understanding. You're not presenting a simplistic, one-sided view. You're actively embracing complexity.
Which is crucial
For high-level academic writing, critical analysis, basically anywhere balanced arguments are valued. Think IELTS test 2 essays, university papers, nuanced debates. It tells your reader or listener, look, I've considered the full picture. I understand the nuances.
That's a great point. It makes your argument much more robust and credible. Okay, let's move on to reason and cause. We have because, since, and as.
Straightforward, but fundamental.
Yeah, these clauses are all about clearly establishing that cause and effect relationship, right?
Yep.
Providing the reasoning behind a statement.
Exactly. They answer the why.
Let's take an example. Because obesity rates are rising, governments must promote healthier lifestyles.
Okay, so this directly links a problem rising obesity rates to a necessary action promoting healthier lifestyles. It demonstrates clear, logical thinking. There's no ambiguity about the motivation behind the proposed policy.
The because makes the connection explicit.
Absolutely. It's a straightforward, logical connection that strengthens any recommendation or conclusion you draw. It provides the justification.
And what about, since global warming is intensifying, immediate action is essential? How is since different from because here? Is it?
It's subtle, but yes, there's often a slight difference in nuance. Since often implies that the reason global warming intensifying is a known or generally accepted truth. It suggests a shared understanding or a premise that's already established.
So it feels a bit like saying, given this fact that we all acknowledge.
Precisely. It assumes a widely recognized or previously established fact as the basis for the conclusion, which can make the subsequent conclusion feel more authoritative, more inevitable.
Interesting. Okay, and then there's, as more people migrate to cities, rural communities are declining.
Here, as typically indicates a simultaneous development or a direct consequence unfolding over time. The decline of rural communities isn't just happening independently, it's presented as a direct result, happening as or because the urban migration is occurring.
It shows a correlation happening in real time almost.
Yes, it often implies a trend or a process unfolding. So, the key nugget here.
Well, it seems these phrases because, since, as are absolutely crucial for building logical arguments. They ensure your conclusions are clearly supported by stated reasons.
Exactly. They make your arguments robust and persuasive. You're not just stating facts or opinions, you're explaining why things are the way they are, or why a certain action is needed.
Which is fundamental for any analytical writing, right? Like explaining trends in an IELTS Task 1 or building an argument in Task 2.
Absolutely fundamental. It transforms mere observation or assertion into reasoned argument.
Okay, next up, condition and contingency. These are clauses introduced by words like if, unless, provided that, and in case.
Right. These are all about setting conditions or prerequisites.
They indicate what must happen for something else to occur, or maybe what safeguards are in place. Let's think about if education were prioritized globally, poverty could be significantly reduced.
This is a classic hypothetical conditional. It presents a potential positive outcome, reduced poverty, but makes it entirely dependent on a specific condition being met, prioritizing education globally.
So it explores possibilities.
Yes, it's about discussing possibilities and drawing clear connections between a potential action and its potential result. Very common in persuasive arguments and policy discussions.
Or consider the strong warning inherent in, unless measures are taken now, the environment will deteriorate further.
Unless packs a real punch here. It conveys a sense of urgency, showing that inaction has clear, severe, and negative consequences. There's no ambiguity about the stakes act now, or else.
It implies a deadline almost.
Indeed. Unless immediately signals a critical window for action, then you have, provided that funding is available, public services can expand.
How does provided that differ from a simple if?
Provided that often feels a bit more formal and perhaps stricter than if. It sets a very clear, often non-negotiable prerequisite. The expansion of public services is entirely contingent on that specific condition funding being available.
So it's a firm condition.
Yes, you often see it in formal contexts like legal documents or policy statements to lay down specific requirements.
Okay. And I find in case the economy worsens, the government should have a contingency plan really effective for talking about preparedness.
Absolutely. In case illustrates a proactive stance. It's about planning for potential negative scenarios, having safeguards ready, rather than just reacting when things go wrong. It signals foresight.
So what's the overarching value of these conditional structures?
Well, they are vital for discussing solutions, making predictions, and engaging in strategic planning. They allow for the precise formulation of possibilities, requirements, and safeguards.
Makes your arguments much more specific and actionable.
Exactly. Indispensable for everything from policy proposals and risk management to business strategies and even just everyday planning.
Okay, great. Now, just quickly, for time and ongoing conditions, we have now that and whenever.
Right. These link situations based on time or recurrence.
For example, now that globalization is inevitable, cultural preservation is essential.
Okay, now that highlights a significant shift in circumstances. Globalization becoming inevitable is presented as a new reality. And this new reality logically leads to a new imperative or a necessary action cultural preservation.
It connects a current state to a necessary response.
Yes, it signals a consequence based on a new established reality, and then, whenever unemployment rises, crime rates tend to increase.
This feels more like a pattern.
Exactly. Whenever it shows a consistent, recurring correlation. It's about observed patterns over time, almost like a predictive statement based on past trends or general understanding. It says, every time X happens, Y tends to follow.
So the nugget for these.
They're incredibly useful for discussing evolving situations, changing circumstances, now that, and observed recurring patterns whenever. They help you describe dynamic relationships and recurring phenomena with clarity.
Excellent. So that covers our complex clauses. That was a lot, but really foundational. Now let's transition into something equally important, relative clauses.
Ah, yes, another powerhouse for sophisticated writing.
They really are powerful tools for adding specific, descriptive information about nouns, but without creating those clunky separate sentences.
Right. They connect ideas seamlessly, making your writing far more elegant and efficient.
It's all about flow, isn't it?
Absolutely. Relative clauses help you avoid short, choppy sentences by integrating detail directly into the sentence where it's needed. They define or elaborate on a noun right there.
Making communication more concise and sophisticated.
Exactly. Think about how many short sentences you'd need to convey the same information otherwise. It would sound quite basic.
Let's look at the common ones. Who, which, whose, where, when, and why. Let's start with the scientists who discovered the vaccine changed history.
Okay. Who clearly links the action, discovering the vaccine, directly to the specific person, the scientist. It immediately identifies them and assigns the action to them. Very direct.
And then, the theory, which was once controversial, is now widely accepted. You mentioned restrictive versus non-restrictive before.
Yes, this is a perfect example of a non-restrictive clause. See the commas around it, which was once controversial, adds extra interesting information about the theory, but it's not essential to identifying which theory we're talking about.
So the main sentence works without it. The theory is now widely accepted.
Exactly. The clause just gives us valuable context about its past. It's like adding a useful side note without breaking the main flow. Very common in academic writing to add nuance.
It's a great way to add depth smoothly. Okay, children whose parents are educated tend to perform better academically.
Here, whose indicates possession or a direct relation. It connects the children to their parents' characteristic, being educated. It's much more concise and elegant than saying something like, children tend to perform better academically, their parents are educated.
Yeah, that sounds clumsy in comparison.
It really does. Whose specifies the relationship efficiently. Similarly, cities where air pollution is high often report respiratory illnesses, uses where to specify a location that is directly linked to a condition, high pollution leading to illness.
Pinpoints the place.
It's incredibly concise and direct, immediately showing the connection between the place and the outcome. Very efficient.
And there are times when technology hinders rather than helps.
This uses when to specify a temporal condition. It's not saying technology always hinders, but that there are specific times or situations when it does. It adds precision and nuance.
Good point. And finally, this is the reason why mental health awareness is crucial.
Here, why explicitly links back to the reason, spelling out the cause or justification for the importance of mental health awareness.
So looking at all these relative clauses, what's the big takeaway?
What truly stands out is how they allow you to pack more information into a single, elegant sentence. This makes your writing feel more mature, more sophisticated, and less choppy.
Improving conciseness and flow.
Significantly, which, again, is a hallmark of high-scoring academic writing, whether it's for an English proficiency test like TOEFL or PTE or a university assignment.
Right. Now, beyond those specific relative pronouns, we also see phrases structured like the fact that, people who, companies that, and so on.
Yes, these function similarly, providing a streamlined way to discuss groups, concepts, or specific truths.
Like the fact that the economy is recovering is encouraging.
Okay, using the fact that does something interesting. It takes the entire clause, the economy is recovering, and treats it as a single noun, a specific piece of information that becomes the subject of your sentence.
Ah, it nominalizes the clause.
Exactly. It gives a sense of objective reporting, treating the information itself as a concrete entity you're commenting on.
Interesting. What about people who exercise regularly tend to live longer?
This uses people who to generalize about a group based on a shared characteristic, exercising regularly. It provides a concise summary of an observation or trend, very efficient and clear.
And something like, nations whose leaders are corrupt often experience slower growth.
This combines that generalization, nations, with a possessive relative clause whose leaders are corrupt, to make a broad analytical statement about a specific category of nations very economically.
Linking a characteristic of the leadership to an outcome for the nation.
Precisely. So these kinds of phrases are highly efficient for discussing trends, making common observations, or defining characteristics of specific categories. They allow you to make broad analytical statements without excessive wordiness.
Very useful tools. Okay, moving on. Let's explore causative and passive structures. These are really interesting because they shift the focus, don't they?
They absolutely do.
They allow you to emphasize actions, outcomes, or maybe general beliefs, rather than focusing on the person or thing doing the action.
Exactly. And this shift in focus often lends a sense of objectivity, a more formal or academic tone, which is vital in many types of writing and formal speech.
Why is that objectivity so valued, especially in academic contexts?
Well, it often makes the information sound less like a personal opinion and more like a generally accepted fact or finding. It distances the writer from the statement slightly, focusing attention on the information itself rather than the writer's perspective. It's about conveying information impartially.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's look at phrases like, it is believed that, it is widely accepted that, and it is often argued that.
These are classic passive reporting structures.
Take, it is believed that artificial intelligence will reshape industries.
This introduces a common future outlook or a prevailing opinion. It signals that this is a generally held view, but crucially, it does so without needing to say many people believe, which can sound a bit vague or less formal in academic writing.
So it is believed gives the idea more weight.
It does, yeah. It presents it as a more established thought. Similarly, it is widely accepted that education is a human right.
This one feels stronger than believed.
It does. Widely accepted highlights a global consensus or a principle treated as an undeniable truth in many influential circles. It suggests broad agreement.
Okay. Then there's, it is often argued that prison is not the most effective punishment.
This phrase is brilliant for analytical discussions. It highlights an ongoing debate or a recurring argument without forcing the writer to take an immediate side. It maintains that objective distance while acknowledging a point of contention.
So you can present different viewpoints neutrally.
Exactly. And we also have similar structures like, it has been suggested that universal basic income could reduce poverty. This introduces a proposal or theory for consideration, again, without necessarily endorsing it personally. It's a way to introduce ideas into the discussion.
And for straightforward reporting, it was reported that unemployment rose sharply last quarter.
Simple, direct, and objective. It focuses on the information being reported, not who reported it. So the underlying strategy here, the nugget.
It seems these phrases are critical for academic discourse. They let you cite general consensus, report findings, or introduce ongoing discussions without constantly attributing them to specific sources unless necessary.
Right. It's vital for building a well-rounded, credible argument that engages with broader thought. They create that necessary academic distance and objectivity.
Then we have structures that focus more on the subject itself, like X is said to be, X is considered to be, or X has been proven to.
Yes, these shift the focus onto the subject and what's generally thought or known about it.
Example, the internet is said to be the greatest invention of the 20th century.
Okay. Is said to be presents a common claim or reputation about the subject, the internet. It's not necessarily presented as a definitive fact, but as a widely circulated idea or judgment, often based on popular opinion or historical reflection.
So it reports a common perception.
Yes. Then, climate change is considered to be the defining issue of our time.
This feels quite strong.
It does. Is considered to be elevates the subject's importance based on general consensus or widespread opinion. It's almost a statement of current relevance and significance, suggesting this is how experts or informed observers view the issue.
And even stronger, exercise has been proven to improve mental health.
Absolutely. Has been proven to points directly to scientific or empirical validation. It implies solid evidence backs the claim, giving the statement significant, almost undeniable weight.
So the power of these structures.
They are excellent for making claims, ranging from common perceptions, is said to be, to strong assertions based on consensus, is considered to be, or hard evidence, has been proven to. They lend authority and credibility to your statements by grounding them in general belief or factual evidence.
Okay, next, structures that express strong necessity or importance. It is essential that, it is imperative that, it is crucial that, it is essential that children learn digital literacy early.
Essential highlights an absolute requirement. It conveys a strong sense of urgency and importance regarding the action needed. It frames it as non-negotiable for future success or well-being.
And it is imperative that governments regulate data use. Imperative sounds even stronger.
It often does, yes. Imperative conveys an even stronger, almost urgent command or necessity for action. It suggests critical, immediate intervention is required, perhaps due to potential harm or ethical considerations.
So the strategic application here, when would you use these?
You use these phrases to underscore the critical nature of a proposed action, policy, or principle. They make your recommendations more impactful and emphasize the non-negotiable aspect of the necessity. They add significant weight, especially in persuasive essays, policy briefs, or formal proposals.
Got it. Really dialing up the urgency. Okay, now let's dive into advanced sentence structures, and we're going to focus particularly on inversion here.
Inversion. A powerful tool for emphasis and formality.
Exactly. These structures add emphasis, they can create a more formal tone, or they link ideas in very specific ways, often by reversing that usual subject-verb order. They can really make your writing stand out.
They absolutely can. Inversion isn't typically used in casual conversation much, but in formal writing and speeches, it's a hallmark of sophisticated English. It allows you to control the focus and impact dramatically.
Okay, a classic example is not only, but also. Let's look at not only does fast food contribute to obesity, but it also increases healthcare costs. What's happening with does fast food contribute?
Right, that's the inversion. Instead of saying not only fast food contributes, we invert the auxiliary verb does and the subject fast food. This inversion immediately signals emphasis and adds a touch of formal elegance.
Why do it though? What's the effect?
It draws attention to the fact that you're presenting two related points, often with the second one being even more significant or surprising. It builds the argument layer by layer, showing multiple facets of an issue with a sense of escalating importance.
So it adds weight to both points, especially the second one.
Precisely. It's a very persuasive structure for building a case by showing interconnected negative consequences or sometimes positive ones.
It feels almost like you're building a bit of suspense before revealing that second point. Okay, then there are phrases involving immediate sequence like no sooner than, hardly when, and scarcely. before.
Yes, these are all about immediacy.
Example, no sooner had the policy been implemented than protests erupted.
This structure creates a dramatic and sophisticated sense of timing. It emphasizes that one event follows immediately, almost instantaneously after another. The inversion, had the policy been implemented, signals this formal structure.
So it highlights the swift reaction.
Exactly. The swiftness of the reaction to the policy is underscored. It implies a direct and immediate cause and effect relationship, suggesting the policy itself was the direct trigger for the immediate protests.
Okay, and hardly had the speech ended when the crowd began to disperse. Same idea.
Same idea. It emphasizes the immediate follow-up. The crowd didn't wait. They started leaving the very moment the speech finished. Again, the inversion, hardly had the speech ended, adds that formal, emphatic touch.
And scarcely had the train left before it started raining.
Just another variation conveying that same sense of immediate sequence. The rain started almost at the exact moment the train departed. The common thread, the nugget.
Seems they're excellent for narratives or explaining rapid cause and effect sequences.
Absolutely. They give your description a more dynamic, precise, and frankly more professional or literary feel. They add that touch of formality and drama that's often effective in storytelling or historical accounts.
Now, for conditional structures that use inversion for emphasis, only when, only after, and not until. These often require inversion in the main clause.
Right. These place a strong emphasis on the condition itself.
Let's take only when pollution became visible did people demand change.
Okay, see the inversion in the second part. Did people demand, not people demanded. This construction forces attention onto the timing or the prerequisite. The demand for change was entirely contingent on pollution becoming visible.
It strongly implies nothing happened before that point.
Exactly. It makes the condition, pollution became visible, the absolute trigger. It's very precise about causality and timing.
Okay. Only after the accident was safety prioritized. No. Similar effect.
Yes. The inversion was safety prioritized, emphasizes that the accident was the sole catalyst for the change. Safety wasn't a priority until the accident happened. It highlights a reactive rather than proactive approach, often with a critical undertone.
And not until she traveled abroad did she understand cultural diversity.
Again, the inversion, did she understand, highlights the specific necessary moment or condition for realization. The travel experience was absolutely crucial and defining for her understanding. It implies she couldn't grasp it before that specific event.
So the strategic use here.
It's to draw attention precisely to the critical timing or the non-negotiable prerequisite for an outcome. It makes your statements very specific about causality and the exact conditions under which something occurs or occurred. Very emphatic.
And for more formal conditional statements, we have these if-less structures. Had plus subject plus past participle, were plus subject plus to infinitive, and should plus subject plus base verb.
Right. These are elegant ways to express conditionals without using if. Very common in formal writing.
So instead of if he had studied harder, you could say, had he studied harder, he would have passed the exam.
Exactly. It's more concise and carries a more formal, almost literary tone. It removes the if, but retains the conditional meaning perfectly. It signals a higher level of linguistic control.
Okay. And were the government to invest more in healthcare, mortality rates would fall.
This is a formal hypothetical, suggesting a future possibility, government investment, and its likely consequence, falling mortality rates. It sounds very measured and authoritative, often used when discussing potential policy impacts or outlining strategic choices in reports or formal speeches.
And should the economy collapse, unemployment would surge.
This is a formal way to express a less likely, perhaps, but serious future condition. Using should here, followed by inversion, gives it a certain gravitas and formality, appropriate for discussing significant potential risks.
So the real advantage of using these inverted conditionals.
They demonstrate a high level of linguistic sophistication. Using them correctly shows real command of English grammar and style. They're often seen in formal academic writing, legal documents, and high-level discourse, lending significant weight and formality to your arguments. Definitely something that would impress examiners in tests like PTE or IELTS.
Fascinating. They really do sound quite elevated.
Okay.
Moving on to participle, infinitive, and appositive clauses. You described these earlier as being about conciseness and fluidity.
Yes, exactly. They're tools for packing more meaning into fewer words, allowing you to condense information and add context or descriptions economically. linguistic shorthand, as you put it.
They make sentences denser with information without becoming unwieldy.
Precisely. They help create smoother transitions and avoid repetitive sentence structures.
Okay, let's look at participle phrases first, like having said that, being plus adjective, and having plus past participle.
These are incredibly useful connectors and modifiers.
Take the internet is useful. Having said that, it can be distracting.
Having said that, serves as a very efficient pivot. It acknowledges the previous statement, the internet is useful, and then smoothly introduces a contrasting point or a qualification. It can be distracting. It's a neat way to offer balance without a hard break.
Like a more concise, although I just said it's useful.
Exactly. Then, being environmentally conscious, she refused plastic bags. Here, the participle phrase being environmentally conscious clearly states the reason for her action, refusing bags. It concisely links a personal characteristic or state directly to a resulting behavior. It implies causality very efficiently.
Got it. And having completed his degree, he applied for a job.
This uses the perfect participle, having completed, to indicate a prior completed action that enables or leads to the main action. He applied for a job. It shows a clear sequence of events, first the degree, then the application, without needing a separate temporal clause like after he completed.
Much more streamlined. So the strategic value here.
These participle phrases are excellent for streamlining your arguments. They demonstrate precise cause and effect, being, sequence, having completed, or concession. Having said that, very economically, making your points flow seamlessly and logically.
Okay. Now, for phrases starting with given that, considering that, and assuming that, these feel like setting a premise.
That's exactly what they do. They introduce a premise, an assumption, or an accepted fact upon which the main statement is based.
Like, given that resources are limited, efficiency is critical.
Given that grounds the argument in an accepted reality or a known constraint, limited resources. It basically means since it is true that resources are limited, so it immediately establishes a shared understanding before presenting the logical conclusion. Efficiency is critical.
Sets the stage logically. Okay. Considering that the population is aging, pension reforms are needed.
Similar function. Considering that highlights an observation in the aging population, which then leads directly to a necessary conclusion or policy recommendation, pension reforms. It shows a clear, logical progression from observation to implication.
And assuming that interest rates remain stable, investments will grow.
Here, assuming that explicitly states the condition or the assumption under which a prediction, investments will grow, is made. It sets the parameters for your projection, acknowledging that the outcome depends on this specific factor remaining true.
So the benefit of using these.
They help you lay out the groundwork for your arguments very clearly. They make your reasoning transparent by stating the premises or conditions up front, defining the specific parameters of your discussion logically.
Very useful for structuring analysis. Now, for clarity in guiding the reader, we often use infinitive phrases like to put it simply, to illustrate this, and to conclude.
These are like signposts for the reader or listener.
Exactly. To put it simply, the system is broken.
This clearly signals your intention. You're about to simplify complex information or offer a blunt summary. It prepares the audience for a straightforward, perhaps even stark, assessment.
To illustrate this, consider the rise of electric vehicles.
This explicitly tells the audience that an example is about to follow, helping them connect the abstract point you just made to a concrete illustration. It guides their focus.
And to conclude, education must be prioritized for sustainable development.
A classic concluding phrase. It provides a clear signal that you're summarizing your argument or reaching your final main point. These phrases are invaluable for guiding your audience through the structure of your points, significantly improving clarity and flow. They manage expectations.
Especially important in presentations or longer essays. Lastly, for this section, the appositive clause, often set off by commas like noun, which is
appositives. Fantastic for embedding definitions or extra details.
like in artificial intelligence, which is transforming industries, raises ethical concerns.
Exactly. The clause, which is transforming industries, is an appositive. It renames or adds crucial descriptive information about the noun right before it, artificial intelligence.
And it does it without starting a new sentence.
Precisely. It embeds that essential background information directly where it's most relevant, enriching the description and creating a more sophisticated, information-dense sentence structure. It's a super efficient way to add detail without interrupting the main flow of the sentence.
Excellent summary. Okay, let's transition now into advanced conditionals and hypotheticals. This feels like where language really gets interesting, allowing us to explore Possibilities, regrets, imagined scenarios.
Absolutely. This is where we discuss what could be, what might have been, or what should happen under different circumstances. It's critical for exploring what-if scenarios, counterfactuals, and expressing wishes or regrets.
Stepping outside of current reality.
Yes, to analyze possibilities, dependencies, and potential futures or alternative pasts.
Okay, let's start with counterfactuals and dependency, using if it were not for and if it hadn't been for. How about if it were not for technology, remote work would be impossible?
This expresses a present counterfactual. Remote work is possible now, precisely because we have technology. The phrase highlights this crucial dependency. It essentially means, without technology, which we do have, remote work would not be possible.
So it emphasizes how essential technology is right now.
Exactly. Then, if it hadn't been for her dedication, the project would have failed. This expresses a past counterfactual. The project didn't fail, and the reason it didn't fail was her dedication. The phrase highlights how that specific past factor prevented a negative outcome. It emphasizes the impact of her dedication in the past.
So the key utility of these.
They are powerful tools for discussing dependencies. They show how different factors shape reality, either in the past or the present, by exploring what reality would look like without those factors. They help pinpoint crucial influences or turning points.
Very useful for analysis. Now, for exploring various hypothetical scenarios, we have phrases like, in the event that, supposing that, imagine ifs, and what if.
Right, these are all ways to set up thought experiments or plan for possibilities.
Example, in the event that oil reserves are depleted, alternative fuels must be ready.
In the event that sets up a contingency plan for a possible future event. It's a formal way of saying, if this specific thing happens in the future, then this preparation must be in place. It emphasizes preparedness for a specific scenario.
Okay. Supposing that tuition becomes free, university attendance would soar.
Supposing that invites consideration of a specific hypothetical change and its likely consequences. It's less about planning for an event and more about exploring the potential impact of a policy change or decision.
And imagine if governments cooperated globally, climate goals might be achievable.
Imagine if governments cooperated globally, perhaps currently unrealized scenario. It pumps creative thought and allows discussion of possibilities that might seem distant but are worth considering. It can be quite inspiring or provocative.
A bit more aspirational. And what if education were accessible to all? Would global poverty decrease?
What if poses a direct question about a hypothetical situation, prompting analytical thought and inviting reflection or debate about the likely outcomes. It directly engages the listener in considering the possibility.
So these are all tools for
brainstorming, problem-solving discussions, exploring complex cause and effect in imagined contexts, crucial for strategic discussions, policy analysis, and generally thinking through possibilities and consequences.
Makes sense. Now, for expressing regret or desire, there's if only plus clause. Like if only we had acted sooner, the damage could have been prevented.
This structure conveys a strong sense of missed opportunity and regret about a past situation. The if only signals a wish that things had been different, often with a feeling of sadness or frustration about the actual outcome.
It's quite emotive.
It is, but it can still be used effectively in formal contexts. The power here is that it allows for expressing this emotional nuance, particularly when discussing policy failures, historical turning points, or missed opportunities where different actions could have altered outcomes significantly.
Okay. Lastly for this section, those unreal comparisons using as if and as though, often followed by a past tense or past perfect. Example, he spoke as if he were an expert, though he lacked experience.
Right. This highlights a discrepancy between appearance and reality. He sounds like an expert appearance, but the reality, though he lacked experience, is different. The as if he were signals this unreality. It's a subtle way to introduce critique.
And she behaved as though she'd never seen poverty before.
Similar idea. This describes her manner of behaving, suggesting it contradicts her actual experience or knowledge. It implies a disconnect, perhaps feigned ignorance or surprising lack of awareness. The as though she had never seen indicates the behavior doesn't match the presumed reality.
So these are useful for
subtle critique, for describing perceived realities versus actualities, or for highlighting incongruities between how something appears and how it really is. They add a layer of nuanced observation and interpretation.
Very useful. Okay, now let's move to advanced connectives and contrast. We touched on contrast earlier with although and whereas, but these seem to offer even more sophisticated options.
Exactly. These expressions signal complex relationships between ideas, particularly contrast, concession, and exception, moving far beyond a simple but or however. They allow for some serious rhetorical precision,
Adding layers of nuance, acknowledging opposing views gracefully.
while still advancing your own argument or revealing a deeper truth. Using these effectively really shows a mastery of rhetorical strategy and balanced thinking.
Okay, let's look at albeit, much as, and contrary to. These seem to offer refined ways to introduce caveats or direct contradictions. How about the plan is effective, albeit expensive?
Albeit is a wonderful little word. It introduces a minor concession or a drawback very gracefully, almost as an aside. It acknowledges the expense, but doesn't let it overshadow the main point, the plan's effectiveness. It adds realism elegantly.
So it softens the negative point slightly.
Yes, or at least presents it as a secondary consideration. Then, much as I value education, I also recognize its limitations. Much as is great for showing strong agreement or value for something before introducing a counter perspective or limitation. It says, I really do agree with or value this aspect, but here's another important side to consider. It signals balanced, reflective thought.
Acknowledging complexity.
Yeah.
And contrary to popular belief, money does not guarantee happiness.
This one directly challenges a widely held assumption or belief right from the start. It signals that you're about to present a different, often perhaps more evidence-based or counterintuitive perspective. It sets up a direct refutation.
So the nugget for these refined contrast words.
They are ideal for demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of an issue. You're acknowledging complexity, qualifying statements, and engaging with differing views thoughtfully. It shows a nuanced thought process, moving beyond simple binaries.
Okay. Now, for stronger contrast and persistence, we have nonetheless, nevertheless, and notwithstanding. These feel weightier.
They are. They introduce a strong contrast or counter-argument, often after a concession has already been made or implied. They signal that despite some obstacle or opposing factor, something else remains true or still happened.
Example, the weather was terrible. Nonetheless, the event continued.
Nonetheless, emphasizes the continuation despite the obstacle. Terrible weather. It shows resilience or determination, highlighting that the negative factor did not prevent the main action.
She lacked experience. Nevertheless, she performed well.
Again, nevertheless highlights her success despite a perceived disadvantage, lack of experience. It makes her good performance seem even more noteworthy because it overcame a limitation.
And, notwithstanding the risks, they proceeded with the experiment.
Notwithstanding is perhaps the most formal of the three. It very clearly demonstrates a decision made despite acknowledging significant drawbacks or risks. It implies a conscious choice to proceed even with full awareness of the potential downsides.
So these three are powerful for
emphasizing resilience, unexpected outcomes, determination, or deliberate choices made in the face of challenges or opposing factors. They add a strong sense of conviction to your statements.
Got it. Now for direct comparison and opposition, we have by contrast and conversely. These seem very clear-cut.
They are. They signal a very direct comparison or an opposite viewpoint or outcome.
Like urban areas are crowded. By contrast, rural regions are spacious.
By contrast, draws a clear, sharp distinction between the two entities, urban versus rural areas, based on a specific characteristic, crowdedness versus spaciousness. It makes the comparison explicit and easy to follow, perfect for side-by-side analysis.
And conversely, spending cuts often lead to social unrest.
Conversely, introduces an opposite effect or outcome. It suggests that if one action, for e.g. increased spending, leads to one result, then the opposite action, spending cuts, leads to the opposite result, social unrest. Or it can introduce a simply contrasting idea or consequence.
So these are essential for analytical writing.
Absolutely. Wherever you need to clearly compare and contrast different phenomena, arguments, or situations, these transition words provide unmistakable signals.
And of course, the classic structure. On the one hand, on the other hand.
Ah, yes, the quintessential balancing act.
On the one hand, fast food is convenient. On the other hand, it's unhealthy.
It's a classic for a reason. It provides a very clear framework for presenting a balanced argument by explicitly considering two opposing or complementary viewpoints, perfect for weighing pros and cons fairly.
It shows you've considered multiple perspectives.
Exactly. Demonstrating that ability to present both sides of an issue fairly is a cornerstone of critical thinking and balanced academic discourse. It signals objectivity.
Excellent. Next up, let's explore emphatic and cleft sentences. You mentioned these structures are specifically designed to bring a particular part of a sentence into sharp focus.
Yes, they act like linguistic spotlights. Adding emphasis or highlighting a specific element you want your audience to pay close attention to.
They direct the listener's attention.
Precisely. They allow you to control the emphasis within the sentence, making your message clearer and more impactful by highlighting what you deem most important.
Okay, we have structures like it is X that Y, or it was X who that Y, and also what X does is Y. These are called cleft sentences, right? Because they split a simple sentence.
That's right. They cleave or split a single clause into two parts to foreground one particular piece of information.
Let's take it is the media that shapes public perception. How is that different from just the media shapes public perception?
The cleft structure, it is the media that highlights the media as the key actor, the specific agent responsible for shaping perception. It places the emphasis squarely on who or what is doing the shaping, making it the central point of the statement more emphatically than the simple sentence does.
Okay. So it was Einstein who revolutionized physics. The focus is clearly on Einstein.
Exactly. It singles out Einstein as the specific individual responsible for the revolution in physics, emphasizing his unique role.
And what education does is empower individuals.
This what-cleft construction emphasizes the action or the effect of education, empower individuals, rather than just stating the fact education empowers individuals. It highlights the function or outcome.
So the power of these cleft structures lies in
their ability to direct the listener's or reader's attention precisely to the most crucial part of your message, whether it's the agent, the object, or the action itself. They create strong impact and make your core idea harder to miss.
Okay. Then there are other phrases that directly state importance or focus on an observation. What matters most is, the thing that surprises me is, and all that is needed is.
These are similar in function, highlighting specific elements, but perhaps feel a bit more direct in stating significance or personal observation.
Like what matters most is sustainability.
This clearly and assertively states the core priority. It leaves no doubt about what you consider the most significant factor or goal. Very direct way to deliver your main point.
The thing that surprises me is how little we invest in education.
This structure highlights a specific observation, but also allows the speaker to inject a personal reaction or emotion, surprise, concern, dismay. It draws the listener in by sharing that subjective response.
And all that is needed is political will.
This phrase underscores the singular critical requirement. It simplifies a complex problem down to its essential solution, suggesting that if this one thing were present, the problem could be solved. Very emphatic.
So these are effective for delivering punchy takeaways.
Absolutely. Or for expressing strong opinions clearly and directly. They're often used for powerful conclusions, summary statements, or to frame the core issue up front.
And let's not forget using inversion for dramatic emphasis, often with negative or limiting adverbials at the start. Only by inversion, never before. Inversion, rarely inversion, and little did.
Right. These are highly emphatic and formal structures.
Example, only by acting quickly can we prevent disaster.
The inversion can we prevent, instead of we can prevent, following only by acting quickly strongly emphasizes that quick action is the sole and necessary way to prevent disaster. It highlights the exclusivity and urgency of the condition.
Never before have we witnessed such global unity.
Placing never before at the start, followed by the inversion have we witnessed, conveys a powerful sense of unprecedentedness. It emphasizes that this level of unity is truly unique in history, perhaps even astonishing.
And little did they know that the virus would spread so fast.
This structure, starting with little and using inversion, did they know, creates suspense and highlights the dramatic irony or ignorance of a future event. It gives the statement a narrative quality, making the subsequent revelation more impactful.
So these inversions are hallmarks
of highly formal, persuasive, or literary writing. They add a significant sense of gravity, uniqueness, and drama to your statements. Using them correctly demonstrates a very high level of linguistic control.
They really do pack a punch.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to comparative and parallel structures. These are all about making precise comparisons and ensuring clarity, balance, and rhetorical impact by presenting ideas consistently.
Exactly. Good comparisons need clear structures, and parallelism is key to making lists or series of ideas flow smoothly and logically. They bring rhythm and coherence.
Let's start with those proportional relationship structures. The more, and the less.
The less.
The correlative comparatives. Very neat.
A classic example. The more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. This perfectly demonstrates a direct proportional relationship. As one factor, learning, increases, another factor, realization of lack of knowledge, also increases proportionally. It clearly links the two trends.
The less we act now, the less control we'll have later.
This highlights an inversely proportional relationship, but still using the parallel structure. Less action now leads to proportionally less control later. It emphasizes the direct consequences of delay or inaction.
And the more society consumes, the more waste is generated.
Again, a direct link. More consumption leads proportionally to more waste. These structures are essential for analyzing trends, discussing causality, and making predictive statements because they clearly articulate these proportional relationships in their applications.
Very effective for showing correlations. Now for equality of analogy, no more than, and just as so too.
These establish equivalence or draw parallels.
Example,
Yeah.
She is no more qualified than her colleagues.
This establishes an equal lack of qualification. It's a nuanced way of saying she is not qualified and neither are her colleagues. Subtly putting them all on the same level, often used to counter a claim of superiority.
Right, it negates any difference. And just as pollution affects air, so too does it affect water.
This uses a clear analogy structure. Just as X affects A, so too does it affect B, to extend a concept or principle from one domain, air pollution, to another, water pollution. It makes a compelling point by drawing that explicit parallel.
So these are powerful for
making arguments by drawing parallels, establishing equivalence or lack thereof, or refuting claims of superiority or inferiority. They allow for sophisticated comparative reasoning and analogy.
Okay. Then, for more precise comparisons, we have things like more X than Y, as much X as Y, and not so much X as Y.
These allow for more nuanced distinctions.
It's more about awareness than funding.
This pinpoints the primary issue, clarifying that awareness is the greater factor compared to funding. It effectively redirects focus to what the speaker considers the core problem or priority.
The project requires as much creativity as technical skill.
This structure, as much X as Y, shows an equal requirement for two different qualities. It emphasizes balance and the need for both creativity and technical skill in equal measure.
And it's not so much failure as a learning opportunity.
This not so much X as Y structure is a powerful way to reframe a potentially negative concept, failure, as something more positive or constructive, a learning opportunity. It highlights perspective and encourages a different interpretation.
So these structures help articulate subtle distinctions.
Absolutely, and they help reframe concepts with precision, adding layers of meaning and interpretation to your statements. Very useful for nuanced arguments.
Finally, within this section, the importance of parallelism itself, using parallel verb forms, parallel clauses, parallel adjectives, etc.
Yes, parallel structure is crucial for clarity and rhythm, especially when listing items or ideas.
Like he enjoys reading, writing, and debating.
Perfect. All three items in the list are gerunds, ing forms used as nouns. This grammatical consistency creates a smooth, balanced, and easy-to-follow flow.
They proposed increasing wages, reducing hours, and offering benefits.
Again, beautiful parallelism. All three items are parallel phrases starting with the gerund, increasing, reducing, offering. This presents the list of proposals clearly and logically, making it very persuasive.
And the system is outdated, inefficient, and costly.
Here we have three parallel adjectives describing the system. This creates a powerful, concise, and memorable description. The rhythm reinforces the negative assessment.
So the real benefit of parallelism.
It makes your arguments clear, balanced, logically consistent, and even aesthetically pleasing. This greatly aids comprehension and retention. Parallel structures make your statements impactful and memorable, something that definitely stands out in evaluation contexts like essays or presentations.
It makes the writing feel more polished and intentional. Okay, now let's explore idiomatic and stylistic academic constructions. These are phrases often found in academic and formal discourse that add sophistication.
Yes, these are often the power phrases that signal a mature, informed perspective. They help convey complex ideas efficiently and with a certain academic flair. Using them correctly can instantly elevate your writing or speaking.
Let's start with phrases for defining importance. X plays a pivotal role in. X serves as a catalyst for, and X is the cornerstone of.
These are great for assigning significance.
Education plays a pivotal role in economic development.
Pivotal role positions education as absolutely central and indispensable to economic development. It's a very strong statement of its fundamental importance, like a pivot point on which things turn.
Technology serves as a catalyst for innovation.
Serves as a catalyst, identifies technology as the driving force that causes or accelerates innovation. It's more precise and dynamic than just saying technology helps innovation. It implies an active, transformative effect.
And trust is the cornerstone of any successful relationship.
Cornerstone declares trust as the fundamental, essential element upon which the entire structure, the relationship, is built. Without it, the structure collapses. It emphasizes foundational importance.
So these phrases elevate analysis.
Definitely. They allow you to clearly state the precise significance or function of a factor, adding analytical weight and clarity to your arguments.
Okay, how about phrases for introducing arguments and debates? There is a growing consensus that this raises the question of whether, and one might argue that.
These are essential for navigating academic discussions.
There is a growing consensus that climate change must be addressed.
This phrase indicates an increasing agreement on an issue among experts or the wider community. It signals that the idea is gaining widespread acceptance and credibility, lending weight to the statement.
This raises the question of whether online privacy truly exists.
This phrasing introduces a critical inquiry or a point of debate stemming from the previous discussion. It invites further exploration of a complex issue without necessarily stating a definitive answer, opening up the conversation.
And one might argue that globalization widens inequality.
One might argue that is a classic way to present a specific viewpoint or argument for consideration, often one that you might explore or even counter without necessarily endorsing it yourself. It maintains academic impartiality while introducing a relevant perspective.
We also hear a compelling argument can be made for.
Yes, that suggests a strong case exists for a particular stance, perhaps one the author intends to support or explore seriously. Mastering these phrases is vital for framing discussions, acknowledging different perspectives, and positioning your own arguments effectively within an existing conversation or academic debate.
Okay, moving to logical progression and consequence. It follows, therefore, that this implies that, and X has far-reaching implications.
These link ideas logically and explore consequences.
It follows, therefore, that prevention is better than cure.
It follows, therefore, that presents a logical deduction. It indicates that the conclusion, prevention is better than cure, is a natural and necessary consequence of the premises or arguments just stated. It's a very formal way to signal a logical conclusion.
This implies that the issue is far from resolved.
This implies that suggests an underlying truth, consequence, or unresolved problem that isn't immediately obvious from the surface information. It invites deeper thought and suggests there's more to consider.
And climate change has far-reaching implications for food security.
Far-reaching implications highlights the extensive, broad, and often complex consequences of an issue, emphasizing its significant impact across various domains, like food security. It signals the seriousness and breadth of the issue.
So these phrases are critical for
moving from data, observations, or premises to reasoned conclusions and broader impacts. They make your analysis more comprehensive, insightful, and logically structured.
Finally, for characterizing issues concisely. X is a double-edged sword, X is a matter of great concern, and X remains a contentious issue.
These are wonderfully evocative and efficient ways to frame a topic.
Social media is a double-edged sword.
This idiom instantly conveys that social media has both significant positive and negative aspects simultaneously. It immediately signals complexity and the need for a nuanced understanding, setting the stage for exploring both sides.
Rising debt levels are a matter of great concern.
This phrase clearly states the severity of a problem, conveying a sense of urgency and importance without needing lengthy explanation right away. It flags the issue as serious.
And artificial intelligence remains a contentious issue. Or artificial intelligence is a topic of ongoing debate among experts.
Both of these position AI within a current intellectual discussion, indicating that it's an evolving, complex subject with significant disagreement or debate surrounding it. It signals that it's not a settled matter.
So these phrases add depth and sophistication to introductions.
Absolutely. To introductions, summaries, or transitions. They provide concise, evocative ways to characterize complex problems or debates, setting the stage effectively for a nuanced discussion and signaling your informed perspective on the topic's nature.
Excellent. We're covering a lot of ground. Now, let's circle back and build on our earlier discussion of contrast with even more advanced concession and contrast structures.
Right, digging deeper into nuance and balance, this is where you demonstrate a highly critical and thoughtful approach, engaging maturely with opposing ideas.
Showing intellectual sophistication, as you said. Okay, let's look at structures like, while it may be true that, or although some people claim that, it is equally valid to argue that. These seem designed for acknowledging and countering.
Precisely. They allow you to gracefully acknowledge a commonly held belief or a specific argument before presenting your counter-argument or more complex perspective.
Example. While it may be true that exams test knowledge, they rarely assess creativity.
This shows an understanding of the common argument for exams, testing knowledge, but immediately offers a significant limitation, not assessing creativity. It acknowledges the validity of one point, but then pivots to introduce a critical counterpoint, allowing for a balanced critique.
And although some people claim that money brings happiness, it is equally valid to argue that relationships matter more.
This directly presents two contrasting viewpoints, framing them as equally valid arguments within the debate. It demonstrates truly balanced thought, showing you can hold and articulate multiple perspectives on a complex issue without necessarily taking an immediate side.
So these are essential for academic writing.
Absolutely. They demonstrate your ability to engage with existing ideas critically, thoughtfully, and fairly. It shows you're not just pushing one agenda, but considering the landscape of the debate.
Okay. How about structures for concession with strong reaffirmation, like, granted that, it remains the case that, or even though there is little doubt that.
These are used when you want to concede a minor point, but then strongly reassert your main argument or conclusion.
Like, granted that fossil fuels are convenient, it remains the case that they are unsustainable.
Exactly. You concede the point about convenience, granted that, but then you forcefully reemphasize what you see as the more dominant or important truth. It remains the case that they are unsustainable. The phrase, "it remains the case that," signals this strong reaffirmation.
And even though remote work can be isolating, there's little doubt that it improves flexibility.
Similar structure. You acknowledge a potential negative, even though isolating, but then confidently assert a primary positive benefit. That is little doubt that improves flexibility. The phrase "there is little doubt that" strongly reinforces the certainty of the second point.
So you use these to show you've considered objections.
But you still stand firm on your main point. It gives your arguments greater conviction and rhetorical power by preemptively addressing and dismissing counterarguments while reinforcing your core message.
Okay, now, structures for challenging assumptions with evidence. Despite the widespread belief that evidence suggests otherwise, or although it appears that, a closer inspection reveals that.
These are crucial for critical analysis and debunking myths.
Example. Despite the widespread belief that technology isolates people, evidence suggests it fosters connection.
This directly confronts a common misconception or popular belief, technology isolates, by introducing contrary evidence. Evidence suggests it fosters connection. It encourages the listener to question assumptions and look beyond surface narratives.
And although it appears that crime is increasing, a closer inspection reveals that reporting methods have changed.
This illustrates how deeper analysis or additional context, a closer inspection reveals, can radically change initial perceptions based on appearances, although it appears. It suggests that surface-level understanding can be misleading.
So these are tools for encouraging deeper thinking.
Absolutely. They push listeners or readers to look beyond assumptions and superficial observations, urging them to delve deeper into the facts and context, a key skill for any analytical task.
And finally, for this advanced contrast section, conceding and pivoting with phrases like, "be that as it may," or notwithstanding the claim that many argue that.
These are useful for acknowledging a point, but then shifting the focus to a different, perhaps more important consideration.
Some argue the protests are disruptive. Be that as it may, they often drive social change.
Be that as it may acknowledges the validity of the first point. Protests can be disruptive, but then pivots, be that as it may, to emphasize a more significant positive outcome or broader impact driving social change. It shows a comprehensive view, acknowledging downsides while highlighting greater upsides.
And notwithstanding the claim that AI reduces jobs, many argue that it creates new industries.
Similar function, notwithstanding the claim, Keras concedes the potential negative argument. AI reduces jobs, but then immediately brings in a powerful counterargument about new opportunities, creates new industries.
So these phrases help navigate complex debates.
Yes, they show an appreciation for different facets of an issue, allowing you to acknowledge various points without getting bogged down or sidetracked from your main argument. They demonstrate intellectual agility and control over the discourse.
Fantastic. Now let's focus on structures that precisely articulate intentions, consequences, and those intricate links between actions and their outcomes. We're talking purpose, result, and cause-effect.
The absolute building blocks of logical explanation and analysis. These structures clarify why something is done, what happens as a result, and how events are connected.
Okay, starting with stating purpose. We have so that, in order that, and with a view to. How do they differ?
They all state purpose, but with slightly different formality or nuance.
Let's see. Regulations are enforced so that consumer safety is guaranteed.
So that is very common and clearly establishes the purpose, guaranteeing safety, of the action, enforcing regulations. It's a direct link between action and intended outcome.
In order that emissions might be reduced, stricter policies are essential.
In order that often sounds a bit more formal than so that. Here, it emphasizes the specific purpose, reducing emissions, for which the stricter policies are deemed essential. It clearly frames the policies as means to an end.
And the policy was introduced with a view to reducing unemployment.
With a view to, plus iming form, also sounds quite formal and focuses specifically on the objective or intention behind the policy's introduction. It highlights the aim or goal motivating the action.
So these are crucial for explaining rationale.
Absolutely, for explaining rationale behind actions, policy objectives, or the intended goals of any plan or strategy. Very important for clarity in proposals and reports.
Now, for expressing direct results. Consequently, as a result of, this has led to, and in consequence.
These signal outcomes and effects.
The factory closed, consequently hundreds were laid off.
Consequently shows a clear, direct outcome or result of the previous event, factory closing. It establishes a simple, undeniable cause and effect sequence.
As a result of poor planning, the project failed.
As a result of, explicitly attributes the failure, the result, directly to a specific cause, poor planning. It pinpoints the reason for the outcome very clearly.
Globalization has led to increased cultural exchange.
Identifies globalization as the direct cause or factor responsible for the resulting increase in cultural exchange. It shows a clear linkage between a phenomenon and its effect. In consequence, works similarly to consequently, perhaps sounding slightly more formal.
So these are essential for analysis.
Absolutely. For analyzing developments, tracking effects, and clearly articulating the consequences of actions, events, or phenomena. They form the core of demonstrating logical connections between cause and effect.
Okay, what about tracing the cause backwards? This can be attributed to stemming from and arising out of.
Right. These are used when you observe an effect or phenomenon and want to identify its underlying cause or origin.
Rising obesity can be attributed to sedentary lifestyles.
This phrase assigns a specific cause, sedentary lifestyles, to explain the observed health issue, rising obesity. It allows for deeper analysis beyond just stating the problem. It points to the root factor.
Many health problems stem from poor dietary habits.
Similarly shows an origin point for the problems. It suggests that poor diet is the root from which these health issues grow or emerge.
And the conflict arose out of a long-standing territorial dispute.
Pinpoints the historical root or the fundamental origin of the issue, the conflict. It traces the current situation back to its source.
So the value here is deeper analysis.
Exactly. These phrases allow for more profound analysis by identifying root causes rather than just describing surface-level observations or symptoms. This is vital for effective problem-solving and comprehensive understanding.
Great point. Finally, for drawing logical conclusions or explaining means. Hence, accordingly, and thereby plus gerund.
These are neat connectors for conclusions and explanations of method.
Demand exceeded supply, hence prices rose.
Hence presents a logical consequence or deduction. It signifies, for this reason, or therefore, making the conclusion, prices rose, seem like an inevitable result of the premise, demand exceeded supply.
The government was found guilty. Accordingly, it resigned.
Accordingly shows an action, resignation, taken in direct response to or as an appropriate consequence of a preceding finding or judgment, being found guilty. It indicates a logical or expected follow-up action.
And they cut taxes, thereby boosting spending.
Thereby, followed by a gerund, boosting, explains the method or means by which the result, boosted spending, was achieved through the initial action, cutting taxes. It clarifies the mechanism.
So these are excellent for concluding arguments.
Yes, or for explaining the mechanics of a process or the way an effect was achieved. They make your points logically watertight and your explanations precise and efficient.
Perfect. Now let's pull together some of this with a focus on academic phrasing for arguments. This is about using specific phrases to introduce claims credibly, cite evidence effectively, acknowledge differing views fairly, and generally structure a robust argument in that formal, credible manner expected in academic settings.
Exactly. This is the language of academic rigor and persuasive scholarship. These phrases provide the essential scaffolding for building arguments that are well-supported, balanced, and convincing under scrutiny.
Okay, first, establishing facts and findings, using phrases like, it is commonly asserted that, it is generally accepted that, and research indicates that.
These lend credibility right from the start.
It is commonly asserted that success depends on hard work.
This introduces a widely held belief or a common claim, suggesting it's part of popular wisdom or a frequent argument, though perhaps not universally proven. It sets a baseline understanding.
It is generally accepted that exercise improves mental health.
This states a widely agreed upon fact or consensus, implying broad agreement among experts or the informed public, lending immediate credibility to the statement.
And research indicates that early childhood education is vital.
This points directly to empirical backing for the claim. It signals that the statement isn't just an opinion, but is supported by studies and data, indicating evidence-based reasoning. And we can be even more specific, like empirical evidence suggests that pollution reduces life expectancy, highlighting the type of evidence. Or statistical data reveals that crime has declined in urban areas, specifying the data source.
So these are crucial for grounding arguments.
Absolutely. They demonstrate that your arguments are grounded in existing knowledge, common understanding, or verifiable research, making them more authoritative and credible. Essential for academic integrity and expected in contexts like IELTS essays where you might refer to general knowledge or trends.
Now, introducing perspectives and debates. From this perspective, an alternative viewpoint is that. Critics argue that, and proponents suggest that.
These are essential tools for navigating complex issues with multiple viewpoints.
From this perspective, the policy seems justified.
This phrase positions an argument or justification as being valid from a particular viewpoint or based on certain assumptions. It acknowledges that the justification might be conditional or depend on how you look at the issue.
An alternative viewpoint is that economic growth harms the environment.
This clearly introduces a contrasting perspective or a different school of thought, which is crucial for presenting a balanced discussion and showing awareness of the complexities involved.
Critics argue that the law restricts freedom of speech.
This clearly attributes a negative assessment or criticism to a specific group, critics, allowing you to report their view neutrally without necessarily agreeing with it.
And similarly, proponents suggest that urbanization drives economic growth.
This attributes a positive assessment or supporting argument to a specific group, proponents. These phrases are essential for navigating multifaceted topics responsibly, introducing different angles, criticisms, or supporting arguments clearly attributed to their sources or proponents.
Showing you can handle the debate fairly. Okay, how about highlighting central issues and reinforcing points, using phrases like, the crux of the matter is that. This point is underscored by, and one cannot overlook the fact that.
These are powerful tools for emphasis and directing focus.
The crux of the matter is that resources are limited.
The crux of the matter pinpoints the central, most critical problem or the absolute core of the issue. It immediately guides the listener to what you consider the most fundamental point in your argument.
This point is underscored by recent findings.
Underscored by shows how a point you've made is strengthened, emphasized, and reinforced by additional evidence or new findings, giving it more weight and current relevance.
And one cannot overlook the fact that inequality persists.
This phrase emphasizes an important, undeniable truth, suggesting it's something fundamental that must be acknowledged and addressed in any serious discussion of the topic. It adds significant weight to that fact.
So these phrases guide the listener to critical insights.
Precisely. They help you direct focus, emphasize key takeaways, and strengthen your argument by highlighting core issues or reinforcing points with evidence or assertions of undeniable truth. They make your most important points resonate strongly.
This is incredibly helpful. Now, let's delve into structures that specifically demonstrate that balanced and critical thinking we've been talking about, the ability to weigh multiple sides, appreciate complexity, and aim for nuanced conclusions.
Yes, this is about moving beyond simply presenting information or arguments to actively analyzing them with intellectual maturity. It's about showing how you think, demonstrating fairness, depth, and a sophisticated approach to complex problems.
So first, phrases that explicitly encourage nuance. It is important to weigh both sides of the argument. A balanced perspective reveals that. And there is merit in both viewpoints.
These directly signal a commitment to fairness and balance.
It is important to weigh both sides of the argument before passing judgment.
This explicitly states the need for comprehensive consideration, advocating for a thorough, unbiased approach. It directly encourages careful deliberation and warns against premature conclusions.
A balanced perspective reviews that both approaches have merit.
This phrasing often introduces a conclusion that synthesizes differing views, suggesting that neither extreme position is entirely correct and that a more nuanced understanding incorporates elements from both sides.
And there is merit in both viewpoints regarding online education.
This affirms the value found in multiple, perhaps opposing, perspectives. It shows open-mindedness and a willingness to acknowledge the strengths or validity in different arguments, even if you ultimately favor one.
So these phrases signal intellectual maturity.
Exactly. They signal maturity, open-mindedness, and a commitment to fairness, inviting the listener or reader to engage critically and avoid simplistic, polarized thinking.
Okay. How about avoiding extremes and broadening the scope? Phrases like, "The reality lies somewhere in between. This issue cannot be viewed in isolation," and "It is essential to consider the broader context."
These push against oversimplification and encourage holistic thinking.
The reality lies somewhere in between government control and individual freedom.
This suggests that for complex dilemmas, the optimal solution or the actual truth isn't found at either extreme, but often requires finding a balance or compromise in the middle ground.
This issue cannot be viewed in isolation from social inequality.
This emphasizes interconnectedness. It argues that a particular problem or issue is often part of a larger system, like social inequality, and cannot be properly understood or addressed without considering those links.
And it is essential to consider the broader context when analyzing policies.
This stresses the importance of holistic understanding. It warns against analyzing something like a policy narrowly, urging consideration of the wider historical, social, or economic environment which it operates.
So these are crucial for avoiding tunnel vision.
Precisely. They help avoid oversimplification and encourage recognition of the systemic nature of many problems, pushing for deeper, more contextualized analysis beyond immediate symptoms or isolated facts.
Now, advocating for sophisticated solutions. The complexity of the issue requires a nuanced response, and rather than adopting an extreme position, a middle ground is preferable.
These argue for solutions that match the problem's complexity.
The complexity of the issue requires a nuanced response from policymakers.
This explicitly calls for a sophisticated, multifaceted approach, arguing that simple, one-size-fits-all solutions are inadequate for intricate problems. It advocates for careful, tailored responses.
Rather than adopting an extreme position, a middle ground is preferable in debates over censorship.
This suggests that in contentious debates, a temperate, compromising approach that avoids ideological extremes is often more practical, effective, or ethically sound.
So these are valuable for policy discussions.
Highly valuable. They advocate for practicality, effectiveness, and careful consideration over ideological rigidity or simplistic solutions, which is often key to finding workable approaches in the real world.
They're finally directly critiquing simplification. Oversimplifying the problem may lead to flawed conclusions, and a binary approach fails to capture the full picture.
These phrases directly challenge simplistic analyses.
Oversimplifying the problem may lead to flawed conclusions about poverty.
This explicitly warns against superficial analysis, highlighting the danger that reducing complex issues like poverty to simplistic terms will result in inaccurate understanding and ineffective solutions.
And a binary approach fails to capture the full picture in gender debates.
This points out the limitations of black and white, either thinking, arguing that complex issues like gender require a more multidimensional understanding that embraces nuance and spectrums rather than false dichotomies.
But these help promote deeper analytical skills.
Definitely. They equip the listener or reader to identify and avoid common logical fallacies like oversimplification or false dilemmas, fostering more critical and sophisticated analytical abilities by highlighting the pitfalls of reductive thinking.
Wow, we've covered an incredible range of structures for building complex and nuanced thoughts. But as you said earlier, none of them would be truly effective without the glue holding it all together.
Right, the cohesive devices for logical flow.
These are the transitional words and phrases, the signposts, that create that seamless movement between sentences and paragraphs, ensuring everything flows logically and is easy to follow.
They are the quiet, often unsung heroes of effective communication. They provide clarity, structure, and ensure your audience follows your train of thought without getting lost or feeling like the ideas are just randomly thrown together. They create coherence.
Okay, let's quickly recap some key categories. First, basic structuring. Firstly, secondly, finally.
The absolute fundamentals for organizing points in a clear, sequential order.
Example. Firstly, funding is required. Secondly, staff must be trained. Finally, results must be evaluated.
It perfectly guides the listener through a logical sequence of steps, arguments, or points. Indispensable for building well-structured arguments, outlines, and presentations, gives your discourse a clear backbone.
Then adding information. In addition, moreover, furthermore, and as well as that.
These signal that you're about to add another point that supports, elaborates on, or reinforces the previous one.
In addition, public transport reduces emissions. That's another benefit.
Moreover, this solution is cost-effective, reinforces the value by adding another positive aspect. These allow you to build depth and breadth in your discussions, making your arguments more comprehensive and convincing by layering supporting points.
Signaling similarity or continuation. Likewise, and in the same vein.
These indicate that the upcoming point is similar to, analogous to, or follows the same line of reasoning as the previous one.
Likewise, other countries have implemented similar laws. Points to parallel developments.
In the same vein, education must be reformed. Continues a theme, example, necessary reforms, by applying it to a new area, education. Useful for drawing connections and reinforcing patterns across different examples or arguments.
Drawing comparisons and contrast explicitly. In comparison, in contrast, and on the contrary.
These clearly set up a comparison or opposition between ideas.
In comparison, developed nations fare better. Sets up a direct comparative analysis.
In contrast, rural areas face resource scarcity. Clearly introduces a contrasting situation or characteristic.
Many think young people are apathetic. On the contrary, they are politically engaged.
On the contrary, directly refutes the preceding statement, presenting the opposite truth or a strong counterargument. These are critical for analytical writing, where highlighting differences and similarities is key.
For clarification and elaboration. To put differently, that is to say, and this means that.
These signal that you're about to rephrase, clarify, explain, or draw out the implication of a previous statement.
To put it differently, inequality is built into the system. Offers simpler or alternative phrasing.
That is to say, more investment is needed. Provides a direct explanation or clarification of what was just stated more abstractly.
This means that reforms are necessary. Draws a direct conclusion or spells out the clear implication of a finding. Invaluable for ensuring your message is understood, especially with complex concepts. And finally, summarizing and concluding. In summary, all things considered to conclude. In closing, taking everything into account in light of this.
These are classic signals to wrap things up.
In summary, both policies have benefits and drawbacks. Provides the concise recap.
All things considered, renewable energy is the way forward. Presents an overall judgment based on weighing all the factors discussed.
In light of this, measures must be taken. Introduces a concluding recommendation or call to action based on the preceding information. Essential for bringing your discussion to a clear, impactful close, leaving the listener with a concise takeaway or final thought.
They provide that crucial sense of closure.
What an incredible journey we've taken today. From the intricate dance of complex clauses all the way through to the elegant precision of these cohesive devices. We've really peeled back the layers, haven't we?
We certainly have. We've explored how these structures aren't just, abstract grammatical rules you find in textbooks. They are dynamic, practical tools for shaping deeper thought and enabling more effective, truly nuanced communication.
Exactly. It's about moving from simply expressing basic ideas to articulating complex ones with real sophistication and undeniable impact.
Which, as we've touched upon, is such a key differentiator in so many contexts: academic work, professional life, And yes, certainly in high-stakes language exams like IELTS or TOEFL, where demonstrating linguistic control is paramount.
Right. Our mission, as we said at the start, was to help you become not just well-informed, but eloquently informed. And hopefully by understanding how these different structures actually work, you're not only improving your own ability to express complex thoughts.
But you're also becoming a much more discerning consumer of information yourself.
That's a great way to put it. You can now identify the nuance in arguments, maybe recognize the careful construction, or sometimes the lack thereof, in powerful messages. You can appreciate the subtlety in how things are crafted.
Whether you're reading a challenging research paper, listening to a complex debate, or analyzing political discourse, you have more tools to see the underlying architecture.
Which brings us, I think, to a really compelling final thought for you to consider. As we reflect on all these sophisticated ways of expressing ideas, think about this. How can the precision of language itself, the very tools we've discussed, be used? Can it bridge divides, or might it sometimes exacerbate misunderstandings if not used carefully?
That's a deep question. What happens when mastery of these tools is unevenly distributed, or when they're used to obscure rather than clarify? How might a shared, deeper mastery of these structures foster not just clearer arguments, but perhaps a more empathetic, more constructive dialogue in our increasingly complex world?
That's a powerful point to end on. So we really encourage you, our listeners, to start noticing these structures actively in your daily life. In what you read, what you hear, look for this architecture of communication around you.
Because once you start consciously seeing them, you really can't unsee them.
That's true. And your own communication, your own ability to articulate your thoughts with precision and impact will undoubtedly evolve. It empowers you, really, in every conversation you have and every word you write.